listening to the Piano Parent Podcast with Shelley Davis, episode 358. Hey there, and welcome to the Piano Parent Podcast. I'm Shelley Davis, a longtime piano teacher and parent with my husband of 4 mostly musical kids. As parents, we spend so much time trying to encourage and motivate our kids. We wonder if we're doing the best things for them. We second guess our decisions, and we worry if we're going to scar them for life. While you focus on encouraging your kids, I'm here to reassure and inspire you. I'll be here every week with practice tips, inspirational teacher interviews, and musical topics to help you impress your kids with your musical knowledge. Parenting is not for the faint of heart, but it's much easier with support, and you have come to the right place. Good morning, piano parents. Today is the first part of a 2-part interview. I'm going to be speaking with a violin teacher. I almost said piano teacher because that's what my mouth is used to saying. We're going to be talking to Crystal Boyack. She is an early childhood violin teacher. In fact, she's a leader in the early childhood violin pedagogy. She's an author, a sought-after teacher, clinician, and lecturer. And so this first part of our interview is going to be with our teacher hats on. And we'll be talking about all the things about teaching young students and how parents can support their young children as they're learning any instrument. Specifically today, we'll be talking about violin and piano. But then be sure and catch the second part of my interview with Crystal because she and her husband are also the parents of 4 young children. And so she'll be sharing some of her insights with her parent hat on as well in the next episode. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'm excited for you to learn more from my new friend Crystal, and here she is. Awesome. Well, Crystal Boyack, I am so excited to meet you. When you joined on the Zoom call, you just popped on with the most friendly face and most friendly greeting. I feel like we're instant friends, and I'm very excited for my listeners to get to know you. Before we jump in too much further, will you share, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, who you are, and we'll get started from there.
Sure thing, Shelley. I'm so excited to be here. I love listening to your podcast. Such a gem for our community. Thank you for what you do. So I'm Crystal Boyack. I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I teach violin to young children, group classes and private lessons. I started my own curriculum to get them from early childhood music classes into the Suzuki repertoire. And then I also teach Suzuki.
Yes, and I'm excited to learn more about Suzuki and for you to share more about all of those particular things as we continue in the interview. For any listeners who might not be familiar with that approach, I'm a tiny bit familiar, so we'll talk about that. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, would you share your own personal music journey? Take us back to little Crystal. When did you begin lessons, and why did you become interested in becoming a musician?
Thank you for asking. I grew up in what I considered a musical home. Now, I want to put an asterisk here because it was a musical home, but I married someone whose mom is like a professional singer, and all the kids play classical music, and like it's a different musical home. He grew up in a very structured musical home. I grew up in a let's all gather around the piano and sing hymns and Disney songs country.
Nice.
I call it my honky tonk musical home. So lots of ways to have a musical home, but grew up in a musical home. We were all required to take piano lessons. So I started piano lessons when I was 9 with a neighborhood teacher. And then in 12th grade, or when I was 12, 6th grade, I still don't know whether my parents required me to join band or orchestra or whether I thought I was required to join band or orchestra because I'm the youngest of 6 and that's what my 5 older siblings did. Either way, I joined orchestra, public schools, 6th grade. And to this day, I do violin for work, and piano is my find joy, release stress, have fun instrument.
Awesome. I did not realize that you, and that's a question I wanted to ask. I didn't send you in the pre-show email about the crossover between piano and violin, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. So tell me a little bit about how your since this is a podcast for piano parents, let's talk about your parents a little bit. I think it's kind of funny that you don't remember if they made it a requirement to join band or orchestra, or if you just thought it was a requirement. I think that's a funny thing. Sometimes our kids have expectations that they think we have placed on them, and we just sort of, okay, go along with it. I'm not going to stop you from doing that awesome thing. How were your parents influential in your success as a musician?
My parents are rock stars. I have amazing, amazing parents. So, first of all, my dad, who was the working parent and traveling, so not home as frequently as my mom, he loved hearing us play. He came to every single recital. If we were practicing, he would just sit and listen. And one time when I was an adult, I asked him, like, Dad, our house was really loud. There was like the trombone and the French horn and the clarinet and the piano, like all going at the same time. And it wasn't necessarily in tune and it wasn't necessarily together. Like, how did you handle that? And he said, in the most sincere, genuine, honest way, Crystal, I love hearing my kids play. It brings me so much joy to watch my kids make music and build any of their talents. And so I had my dad who just was the back parent, but just loved watching it. And then my mom, who was the primary caregiver working full time at home, she always paid on time. Like I always brought a check the first lesson of the month. And I'm pretty sure my adult brain looking back at it, she always gave a really big tip to my teacher.
Ah,
My teacher would always look at the check and be like, I told your mom she didn't have to. Tell her thank you. And kid me had no idea what was going on. But adult me, I'm like, I think I know what was going on. So she
yeah.
always took her time. Anytime we needed to buy a book, we were immediately went into town. It was a half-hour drive to town. We got the book. Um, she they always drove me to lessons, always drove me to youth symphony, which youth symphony was like an hour and a half away to Salt Lake. We lived in northern Utah, and every Saturday they'd be driving me. And then one time my mom mentioned Crystal, Julie, who's my violin teacher, my piano teacher, really wants one of her students to play Claire de Lune. And I think you could be the one to do it. And she bought me the Claire de Lune music and put it on the piano. And so when we moved to another town and I knew I was going to stop doing lessons with her, I worked and worked and worked and worked on Claire de Lune so that I could be the student to give that gift to my teacher. And that was because my mom wanted to give that gift to the teacher. And still to this day, Claire de Lune is my stress relief, my fun, I need an escape. That's the piece I pull out.
Yes. I love how your mom was so smart, whether she was sincere, really wanting a gift for your teacher, or whether she knew this was kind of a backdoor way to get you on board. I think that's really, really smart. And I love that your parents recognized music as a gift rather than a chore. And for anybody else, the untrained father ears, that might have just been a cacophony of noise, but for your dad, that was the sound of his family, his children. And I also love the different angle that you mentioned for your mom and how she was supportive with your studies. So many times the communication between parents and teachers can be stressful. If they're not communicating well and supporting each other, then the poor kid sitting on the bench can kind of get the short end of the stick. And for your mom to recognize the value of taking care of a good teacher and then encouraging you to do things as a gift to your teacher, I think that's a really neat perspective.
Absolutely.
As I was getting to know you, oh, I should mention that Andrea Miller from the Music Studio Startup is the person that connected the two of us together. And we love her and love the work that she's doing with her podcast. And I was so glad when she introduced the two of us So then when I started researching to get to know you a little bit better, I found your interview with Christine Goodner, who also has a wonderful podcast and has been on my show and invited me on hers. And there were some things that you all talked about that I was like, oh, she needs to say this to my listeners. And that's so good. And some of the things that you mentioned were that, especially with violin, you didn't start as early as the typical student, and that sometimes you felt a little bit behind, that you felt like you had to catch up. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that today.
Absolutely. So I went to college and I was around all these kids who were called Suzuki kids, which I didn't really know what that mean, who started when they were 3 and could play anything by ear. And I had to practice and practice and practice. And they were winning the competitions, and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't. So yeah, I had this feeling of being behind through college. And I think this feeling is indicative of something internal. When you're feeling that, or when you see your students feeling that, it's not necessarily something that's happening externally, but it's happening internally. It's a sign that we feel we're in competition with others instead of cooperation with others. And this is dangerous because competition is antithetical to connection and to cooperation. And we really need cooperation because there is no hierarchy really in music. There's no better than, less than. There's just different strengths. So what I was seeing of playing music by ear, I thought was better than me,
Right.
when really that was just a strength. And I had a strength of reading music. There's strengths of different styles. Some people are really great at classical and need to learn from the pop musicians, and the pop musicians need to learn from the classical musicians. Or techniques. Some people have really great left hand technique. Some people have really great right hand technique. Some people are great practicers. Some people are great performers. And so taking away the competition, and turning it into cooperation, and taking away the hierarchy, and just seeing us as a group of people with different strengths, is what's going to build our community. So that feeling of being ahead or behind, it can come externally. Teachers who do like recital orders from least advanced to most advanced, that promotes a feeling of competition. Or seatings in orchestra, of always having the first chair be the best and always having eighth chair be the worst. Like that all promotes this competition, which isn't healthy to our community. Instead, we can do things like duets, or group numbers, or group classes, or practice partners. All these things promote that cooperation and that collaboration and that connection, that diminishes those feelings of being ahead or behind, and builds that community stronger.
I love that so much. I had my own feelings of inadequacy whenever I was coming up. My father is a retired pastor, and so church music was very important in our family. And that's what he told my teachers. I want her to learn how to play hymns and embellish hymns, and be able to support a congregation and all of those things. So I learned Claire de Lune a little bit. I didn't really study it all that much. My last teacher said, okay, I'll give you a few hymns, but you got to give me some classical repertoire too. So we had a good compromise. But for years, I felt like my music wasn't quality, or my education didn't measure up to someone else. And over the years, and with experience and recognizing exactly what you said, that in music there shouldn't be any competition. It should be collaboration. And what is a weakness that I perceive in myself, someone else might feel what I'm able to do is something that they don't measure up with, and we all have something to share. And I think that's an important word for parents to hear, because I feel like sometimes parents, we internalize, or we feel responsible for our children's success, and we see what other children are doing, and we feel like, oh, my kid needs to measure up, and we put extra pressure on our own children that shouldn't be there. Can you talk just a little bit more about how parents can let go of that feeling of trying to keep up with the other kids?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, this could be a whole podcast. This could be a whole book. But
Yes.
just like Smalley, I think it's important to recognize that we are not our kids, that
Hmm.
we are, I am Crystal and my daughter is Rachel, and I actually cannot control her. She gets to make her own decisions, and I provide the environment. So I
Yes,
provide an environment of working hard. Provide an environment of appreciating music, but it's her choice whether to do that or not. And I have to respect that choice, that I cannot force that. I get to respect her, but I can model that. I can do my own things that are hard. I can do my own things that build my talents, and I can take ownership of the feelings I have for keeping up or being the best person I can be. And my child can learn from that, but I cannot, and it would be unhealthy to put that expectation on another person that I don't have control over.
absolutely. So, parents, if you're listening, take a deep breath, let it go. Give yourself grace. Don't put that extra pressure on yourself as a parent, and certainly don't let it trickle down to your kids as they're learning to play great music, whatever that music is, whatever instrument they're playing.
Yes, and parents, I'm there too. I'm a parent of kids and it's hard. So just know it's hard. We're all in it together.
Yes, I'm glad we're here together. Yay. So will you talk a little bit more about the Suzuki philosophy? How is that different from traditional teaching, or what makes Suzuki unique? And let's go that direction.
Oh, so great. So Suzuki is this really big word that has a lot of meanings in different circles and a lot of feelings in different circles. So I think it's important to start with like Shinichi Suzuki was a human being. He was a Japanese human being. I mentioned that he was Japanese because he had this completely war-torn country
Mm,
post World War II, and he started um, building music education as a way to heal his war-torn country. And he believed that the beauty that comes from music and musical people can heal the war-torn world of post World War II. So Shinichi Suzuki, the person, developed the philosophy, the Suzuki philosophy, as well as the Suzuki repertoire. So let me tell you my story my introduction to Suzuki as a way to talk about his philosophy. So I was in college studying music education, and there was a guest lecturer who came in to talk about like the business of running a studio, and she just mentioned offhand that she has her parents read this book called Nurtured by Love by Shinichi Suzuki. And so I went to the library and checked out this book, Nurtured by Love, and my whole world was turned upside down. This was a man who truly believed in young kids' ability to make great music. Some of the quotes from the book is like, beautiful tone makes a beautiful heart.
mm,
He talks about where love is deep, much can be accomplished. He talks about, I don't want to make professional musicians. I want to make good citizens. If you can learn to listen and make great music, then you can learn to listen and be a great human being. And so these things just washed over me of I want to be a teacher like this who is has this powerful love presence that motivates people to change, that I am building a better world through music education. And so I started getting my Suzuki training after that. And so the Suzuki training is his 10 books of repertoire, and each piece of repertoire is connected to a technique needed to play. So I learned all the repertoire, all the techniques, and then how to learn or how to teach all those techniques through all that repertoire from the time the child comes into lessons until they're playing the concertos.
beautiful. I'm trying to look and see where my Nurtured by Love copy is. I love that book. And I did do Suzuki Book One training for piano and became certified. And I guess because I grew up with the traditional reading music more than focusing on the ear, that's what I'm comfortable with. And so, but the whole philosophy that every child can learn, if they learn their native language to speak, they can absolutely learn music, and it's almost more caught than taught in some ways. And is he the same guy? I'm sorry, is he the same man that said children learn to smile from their parents? Isn't that
That
him?
that's him. Yes.
Love that. Such
And
a
you look at
beautiful.
him and he has this smile that just radiates.
Yes.
Oh, just a powerful person.
I love that so much, and just the whole philosophy. And I'm glad that that's the way that you teach your students. And I wonder, um, as a specialist in early childhood violin pedagogy, how or what do you wish teachers of young children knew? And actually, if we can also kind of piggyback on that, what do you wish parents of young children knew?
Oh, yeah, great question. I would say use music that kids love, first of all. So I would say three things. One is use music that kids love. So as a parent, look at the music of your culture, sing that to your child, give that connections to your child, sing in the shower, sing in the kitchen, sing in the car, sing lullabies, and let them develop that love for this great music in our society. And so for teachers, teach music that kids love. For parents, use that music in the home that kids love. The second thing I would say is sing and move as a
Mhm.
family. So this music that you love, sing in the kitchen, sing in the shower. I'll share a story in, part two of this of, me having a really hard time practicing with my 3-year-old daughter and our relationship just being so strained. And one day I was singing and dancing in the kitchen and she came and started singing and dancing with me. And then it was like a full on singing dance party. And it was through this singing and movement that our relationship was healed and there was this beauty and there was this connection through the music. Also just totally selfishly as a teacher, the more you sing and move, the better they're going to be able to play on the instrument. If they
Yes.
can just sing in tune, for the violin they're going to play in tune. If they can move in time, they're going to play in time, and it makes our job as a teacher a lot easier if they already can have that what we call basic music competence in the field of singing in tune and moving in time, because then lessons are just about the instrument and we don't have to teach our child about music. So selfishly it helps us, but it also brings that healing beauty and connection that we want.
Do you
And
have, oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Do you have some, I mean, you said singing and dancing. I would imagine just clapping to the beat and feeling the beat, nodding your head when you're driving down the road, just keeping time with the music. Any other practical applications of helping children get that innate feeling of pulse and pitch?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can be so silly with this, jump, kick, stomp, waltz, bounce, stretch, sway, skate, um, anything you want. Scratch your arms like a monkey, or jump like an elephant, or swing your ears like an elephant.
Yes.
Of just having that joyful playing through music.
Beautiful. And I interrupted you. You were going to go on to another point. Let's keep going.
Oh, I was just gonna say the third thing I would love, teachers of young kids to know is make sure the techniques you're teaching are appropriate. A curriculum designed for adults with adult cognitive and physical skills are not going to be appropriate for a 3-year-old. And so I developed a book of, appropriate technique for young kids. If you're a violinist, I recommend you looking into that. But if you're a pianist, there's other young child specific books that can help with that child. So make sure you're using developmentally appropriate techniques and repertoire.
Absolutely. Such a good word. Beautiful. And since we're talking and really giving our attention to parents today, it's so good for them to be listening to music and enjoying music at home. And you don't have to know how to play an instrument. You don't have to have the best singing voice, but just your children idolize you. You are their favorite people. And so this is an opportunity to share something that both of you can enjoy, and it's a great preparatory to just be making music together or listening to music together. And I love what you said, so that when they go to lessons, it can be about making music on that instrument, not just learning music from the very beginning, because you've already given them such a head start. That's so good. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about your books?
Oh, absolutely. So The piano world is so ahead of the violin world. Sorry, violin world. In the piano world, you have level one in a lot of repertoires, but then you also have this primer book for really young kids in most repertoire.
Right.
And so if you're starting a really young kid, you can start in the primer and then to move to level one. Well, in the violin world, there are not primer books. There is only level one. And the Suzuki repertoire is just one example of it starts with level one. And I mean, if you imagine a pianist, a young 3-year-old at the piano needing something before level one, that's tenfold what a violinist needs, because the violin, you're holding it outside the mid range of motion. You have a separate thing going on in your left hand and your right hand. You don't have keys. You have to be exactly in tune. Like, just
Right.
so many more things a 3-year-old has to learn before they can play level one music. And so there's like these traditions in our field of different made up songs to get from the first lesson to level one, but none of them had great melodies. None of them had harmonies. None of them existed outside our little circle. And so what I did is I collected music from all throughout the world that can be adapted to teach the techniques of the first lesson to Twinkle, and I put them in a book. So my book's called Wee Violin, Wee, W-E-E, meaning little kids, but also we as in the community that it takes
Yes.
to build a young musician. And it's 33 songs to get you from that first lesson to level one. It's the primer for level one.
Yes. And you also have developed others, right? We cello and we viola, is that right?
Yeah. So Wee Cello and Wee Viola just came out. And then I have a teacher training course for any teachers who want to know exactly what it's like to get from that first lesson to Twinkle. I have an online course that goes step by step, everything you need to know from that first lesson to book one.
Awesome. Well, go ahead if you don't mind. I'll include that in the show notes, but I'm sure that we've got listeners here who would love to learn more about the books and the course, and maybe even connect with you. What is your website, Crystal Boyett? Tell me.
Absolutely. I love connecting with people. That is my favorite thing to do. So please reach out to me. My website, crystalboyackmusicstudio.com. And that's where you can go to learn more about Wee Violin, Wee Viola, Wee Cello. And then I'm also on Instagram at Crystal Boyack Music Studio.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate so much you hopping on the call with me today, Crystal. It's been so nice getting to know you. And this is just part one of a two-part interview. As soon as we're done here, and for listeners, next week we'll be releasing the parent side of Crystal's conversation, because she is the parent of 4 children. Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay, we'll be learning more about that. But as we close off this side of where you're wearing your teacher hat for your interview, is there one last word that you would have to share um, uh, before we close out this conversation?
Sure thing. This is something I've been talking to different teachers about, of their feelings of inadequacy because they're not a great performer.
Mm,
And this feeling of I can't be a great teacher because I'm not a great performer. And to them, I'd like to say, I want you to look at the sports world and look at the coaches of professional athletes. Almost every single coach of a professional athlete never played professionally.
mm,
Most of them played in college and then went the coaching route. They never went the what would for us would be performing route, what for them would be the professional route. So you do not have to be a professional musician to be a great teacher, and even a teacher of professional musicians. And so I'd encourage you to just let that go, let that stigma go, and own that you are a teacher and that is your profession, and be the best teacher you can be, that you do not have to do everything and you do not have to be everything. You can operate in your zone of genius, which may be teaching and not performing, and stay in that zone of genius of being a fabulous teacher.
Beautiful. Absolutely. And that kind of makes me think of what we spoke about closer to the beginning of our conversation, that we all have our different strengths as teachers, as parents, as musicians. There's not one size fits all. And you are the perfect teacher for your students, and you are able to meet them on a personal level with your personality and your style and your expertise, bring that to your students as the gift that we want them to have. And you wouldn't want them to feel any inadequacy with the music they bring to you. So don't feel inadequacy with the experience and the lessons that you give to them. We all collaborate together.
Absolutely. And we all strengthen each other.
Thanks so much, Crystal.
Thank you, Shelley.
And that's the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for hanging around all the way to the end. If you haven't done so already, this would be a great time for you to hit the subscribe button. If you're listening through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever your favorite podcast player is, hit subscribe so you will be the first to receive next week's episode. I would love to connect with you. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Piano Parent Podcast, and you could just email me, Shelley at pianoparentpodcast.com.